Thank you. Come on in. We're just getting started. You're perfect timing. Hi, everybody. My name is Joshua Sear, and I am the Director of Education and Acceleration for Alpha Loft. Raise your hand if this is your first time at an Alpha Loft event. All right. That's a good number of first-timers. Raise your hand if this is the first time for you as a Jupiter Hall event. All right, so we got a lot of new hands and faces for both. So I do want to give a quick shout out to Jupiter Hall for hosting us here tonight and being really great ecosystem partners and advocates for the arts and culture community here in Manchester. And then before we really dig into all the future, let's talk about the present real quick. Some of you might have gotten one of many emails that were sent out by different organizations and all the tweets and LinkedIn posts and stuff about Alpha Loft and the New Hampshire High Tech Council. So I'm very pleased to say that today was announced that the boards of both Alpha Loft and New Hampshire High Tech Council had approved basically a strategic alliance, a very strong strategic alliance between the both organizations. And essentially what that means is over the past several years we've been doing quite a bit which was very complementary with both organizations, and we've actually been working together on a number of events, and it really only made sense for us to tighten that partnership even more. And so, you know, over the next 6 months or so, you might see things mostly the same as usual. We'll continue with the events that we've always been doing. We'll be doing our Startup Accelerator, but we're going to see, as time goes on, some really interesting and new and innovative things for the state of New Hampshire because of the alliance. So, and then Matt Cookson, you're in the back wave here. That's the New Hampshire High Tech Council there, and then we have some board members. You can just wave. So one little last quick note I will say is, you think startups are hard? Nonprofits are hard, right? Nonprofits are really hard. Number one, we have to, you know, keep them staffed and do good works, but we have to do it on low budgets, and you have to find funds, and they're headed by really passionate people that do this in addition to their daytime job on all these boards. So thank you very much for everybody on both of the boards of the organizations for putting in all the time and efforts to really make a meaningful impact for New Hampshire. Also, thank you to our sponsors. If you're from the Manchester area, you're no stranger to Oracle and Dyna, and certainly University of New Hampshire here in Manchester, but also in Durham, there are our founding sponsors. Alpha Loft wouldn't be able to do here. There's Mike Cash, and everybody's waving at Mike. Hi, Mike. Mike's a former employee at Alpha Loft and also a big supporter. All of our sponsors allow us to do really informative events like this that are free, right? And so what we feel like what we want to do through all these generous sponsors is be able to work with founders and not take from founders, right? We want to be able to support people that are creating high-impact, valuable, innovative companies in the state of New Hampshire and give them the resources they need. And these are all the sponsors that allow us to do that, and I want to say thank you to them. Literally none of this would happen without generous people and sponsors. Speaking of people, and you could be some of those people in this audience, are our community supporters. These are folks who literally chip in a few dollars every month to help events like this happen. And we have a lot of community sponsors that I want to thank. And then, and it steps up a level with our seed sponsors who give a little bit more, and then finally our venture sponsors who are actually giving us $50 a month just to help community events like this go on. So thank you to all of our community for supporting us and helping support you. Now we're here for the purpose of the talk. What is disruption? And before we talk about tech and future disruption and what that means to you, we should probably get a grasp of what it actually means in and of itself. So one way of thinking about disruption in the guise of what we're going to be talking about is how we operate a business, right? So if you've got a business, maybe it's Intel, or maybe it's a shoe manufacturer, right? And they've been operating pretty much the same for a very long time. And you make innovation, we enhance, we make a new line of shoes, we have a better material for the sole, right? It's a little more rugged stitching or a better way to stitch. Those aren't disruptive innovations, right? They're sustaining innovations. We're making a new version of Microsoft Word that's a little bit better than, hopefully, last year's version of Microsoft Word, right? And we're having these sustaining innovations, and this gets us by. This is foundational for a lot of what we have here in our economy, right? This is how most businesses operate. But every once in a while, there's a disruptive innovation. And a disruptive innovation makes everything we've been doing, the status quo, obsolete, potentially, right? Or at least in certain industries. Or it creates enormous opportunity where we were doing something on a really, really, really old model. We can do it in a new way because some new technology or innovation has enabled that. So we're going to look at that a lot. So it's not always a new business, right? Sometimes it's just a new approach because we have a new technology to do that business in an entirely different way. But the key for that is that it's displacing the establishment. That's what we care about, right? And we care about it for one of two reasons. Well, we're going to care about it because it's either going to displace us, right? So we care about our existing businesses and how we can keep track of what's coming down the road so we don't get run over it. We can surf the wave or however kind of metaphor you want for that. Or we care about it because we want to take advantage of that. We're going to start a new business. We're going to create a new startup. And we want to plan for that startup based on the future and not what's going on right now, right? So, nice. I don't know what that was, but it was perfectly timed. So let's take a look at, I did a screenshot of Benedict Evans. This is a really great presentation that Benedict Evans did on what's happening now and 10 years in the future. And I really recommend, if you're into this stuff, to go track him down, follow him on Twitter, and watch his slides and presentation. I took a screenshot, though, because I thought it was really important. When we think of disruption, we typically don't understand it until it's already way happened, right? We don't even know if we're in the midst of it. Because what happens, and we notice this line here, is when we're getting all the tech to work, nobody knows about anything. We're not seeing it implemented anywhere. And in fact, when we're trying to find the product market fit, make sure people actually care, right? And what we have makes sense, nobody's really doing it. Nobody's touching anything. And it's not until this point right here that things start sloping up. And that S-curve, which isn't really an S, but they call it an S-curve, that's sloping dramatically up there, where you're pouring on the rocket fuel. What we don't realize, everybody at this moment, some innovators are going to say, pick this up, right? And we're starting to climb. Most people don't realize that it's happened until it's well past. But it's actually been worked on for a very long time. So if we're paying attention and we can actually foresee some of this tech innovation, we can identify much earlier than everybody else and maybe take advantage of that and apply it to our business, a new business. So let's take a look at some classic S-curves. Now, you may not be able to read all the little words. Can you read all the words in the back? It doesn't really matter. I'll list a few of them to you. This is from the last 100 years or so of tech disruption and the S-curves that follow. So we got telephone, electricity, cars, and how long it took before there was 100% market adoption, right? And what you might notice is for some of these, the curves are getting... this one is probably air travel, yeah. So what we notice, though, is the curves are happening faster and faster, right? Is not taking quite as long. And so that's one of the trends that we're seeing in tech disruption, is that the time for adoption is getting shorter and shorter, at least right now, right? So let's take a couple of examples. This is a screenshot from a video by Tony Seba. He's got some really great, intense, multi-hour long videos where he talks about innovation and tech disruption in the future, and it goes into minute detail, which I think is really cool, but I stripped out a lot of for the sake of this presentation. But I love this shot here. It's 1900, Fifth Avenue in New York, and can you find the car? It's right here, right? There's one car, and so 13 years later, find the horse, right? So there's that key moment where if you were back here, there's no way cars are taking off. Right? Cars are clearly not the future. iPhone will never take over the BlackBerry market, right? It's done. The key for disruption of a disruptive technology is it's no longer having to fight with status quo. So the hardest thing for a lot of us to do is to change default human behavior, right? We all make coffee the same way. It's with Folgers crystals, because that's how my mom taught me to do it so long ago, right? Until K-Cups come around, and somehow it changes everybody's minds, right? Or in the case of this, it no longer makes sense on multiple different levels. There's an order of magnitude more value than you had before. Not a 5% increase or decrease in cost or slightly faster travel times. There's an order of magnitude better, and oftentimes on multiple different measuring points. And that's when we see that dramatic, radical change. And so what we often find for most of us when we're starting a nonprofit, we're starting a new small business, we're starting a tech startup, is we found something that is better than the status quo, but is it better enough to get everybody in this room to bother changing to a new brand or to adopt this new thing and change habit, right? Because we know habit is incredibly hard to change. I can't stop drinking Diet Coke. I have tried and tried and tried. That habit is just like a huge mountain for me, right? So it doesn't really matter what the new drink comes out to me. I still got my Diet Coke or Diet Dr. Pepper, if I can find it. So let's take a couple more looks at existing disruption. So what I love about this is it still has the computer in it, right? This is a desk with computer in there, an Apple 2GS or something probably. It's far too clean, right? So, but imagine all of these things. How many of us have any of that? Like, who? Raise your hand if you've ever bought a Yellow Page ad. I did. That was actually really important at one point. There's who uses Yellow Pages anymore, right? And a Globe, which I'm actually totally going to buy for my daughter. But like, we don't really need much of this stuff anymore. So much so that literally it's all been replaced, one app at a time, because of the disruption of, in this case, two technologies, right? So why do we care? Well, if we have an existing business, sometimes we can just be completely steamrolled by this new technology that comes out. An example is a digital camera, right, and changing the film market. You might want to guess what company, invented the first digital camera? Kodak, right? Invented the first digital camera, and they stifled it, right? And so they were even aware of the disruption, but the nature of the disruption would cannibalize their entire business, right? It's so hard for the incumbent to change when it's a disruptive technology because it literally means changing everything about the company. All of you people who work for me, who have set jobs and they know what your job is and what you have to do, and you're all going to have to change and do all entirely different new jobs. It's so impossibly hard, right? It's a really difficult task. So if you've got an existing business, you really want to keep track of what those disruptive technologies are, how that might impact you. And if you're a new business, are you building for today's market, today's needs, or are you building for the future, right? So if we think about this, and you're building, it could be anything. You're building a new app. You're building a technology that's every person who drives is going to want, right? I know exactly one company right now in New Hampshire that's working on that. But how many of us are going to be driving that way in 10 years, 15 years, right? So are we building for the market that exists now, or are we building for what we see the market existing in the future? So let's take a look at a number of different potentially disruptive technologies, vast swaths of technology, what those examples are, some implications. And the first one I want to start off with is automation. Anybody see the human in here? Right? It's hard because they dress in red. I think that was on purpose. I think there is technically somebody behind the automation word too. But the point being, manufacturing isn't dead in the United States. We actually manufacture more than we did in the past. We just do it with a lot less people, right? Because the automation has come along. So automation isn't something radically new. The difference is now our automation is being introduced into all these different other markets where we haven't had to deal with that before. So here's an example. Let's take a look at retail. So these are actually little robots buzzing around, grabbing things and shipping it to new locations. And that could be, it's probably Amazon. Here's the drone. So pizza delivery. How awesome would that be? I want a burrito and beer delivery if I had my pick first, but that's live now, right? Especially with Amazon if you live in the certain markets. So look at this. This is a little flow chart for how easy it is. Alexa drone pilot. So your voice goes to Alexa, right? Your voice-activated home spy device. And that goes through some text demands to your Internet of Things, which goes through through an app. All of this you can do and develop yourself right now, and it sets a command out to your drone. Like you can literally, any of you could create commands for your voice-activated home device to command your drone to do, who knows, whatever you're trying to do, right? And so what's interesting and compelling for automation and drones and all that for retail is if you take a look at the delivery cost for a small package. How much does it cost for FedEx premium versus drone? The cost of a drone per mile for those in the back is about 5 cents. And so that's an order of magnitude. All right, this becomes really compelling if you can scale it, right? That order of magnitude difference of a couple dollars, which they eat with Amazon Prime, to 5 cents per mile and near instantaneous delivery, right? And so, their first, it was of course a highly staged delivery, but Amazon's first delivery took less than 30 minutes from order to actual doorstep, clicking on button to doorstep. So, that future is here. What does that mean for retail for us? And we think about this for retail, but automation exists in all different aspects. But let's think about it for retail. We compound that with the market dynamics that exist for the new buying generation, which is essentially our millennials. And so it says 77% of millennials prefer to spend money on experiences over things, right? I'm not in the millennial market, sadly. I'm a little older than that, but I can definitely sympathize with that now, right? Stuff just feels like obligation and takes up space, right? I need bigger spaces. We just had a whole conversation about having to get storage rooms to store our stuff because we can't fit them in our houses anymore, right? So for a lot of people, that's not appealing in any way. And so when we combine the preference for experiences for upcoming generations and the nature of retail, where many of our retail establishments may not have any staff, right? And our nature of wanting to buy something isn't really tied to the location so much, doesn't need to be tied to a location anymore. What's likely to happen, especially with drone delivery and autonomous cars where they can drive us to wherever, is when we're going out to buy something, a physical good, instead of ordering it online or having it delivered to us, it means there's a reason for that trip, and we're interested in that experience. And so places like Elm Street and Hanover Street here in Manchester need to be destinations in and of themselves, right? The reason why we go to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, shout out Portsmouth, is it's a foodie destination. It's beautiful, it's cool, people want to go and visit Portsmouth. Also, it has great shops, right? And we can tie those things together. So if you have retail that isn't bundled with that experience and can easily be acquired, those items easily can be delivered, drone or autonomous car or the shuttle buses, all the other things that are going to be coming in the future, were ordered online, what's compelling about coming to those retail locations? Well, it turns out, and at the same time, all those McDonald's employees, many of the people that are working in bigger box retail, they're all being replaced, right, with computers, little robots that do the cleaning, all the other stuff. And so a huge component of our employed labor force is being disrupted. The way we shop is being disrupted. The way we sell is being disrupted. All this automation is having a huge impact, right? So is that an opportunity for you? Is that an opportunity for companies to create experiences and help consult for that, right? And think about all the other ways that there might be opportunity found in that. Automation has other implications. It came out in 2013, so it's a little dated now. But this was some company came up with a probability of certain job classifications versus others being completely disrupted by automation. So if you're a telemarketer, if you're an accountant or an auditor, if you work in retail, technical writer, retail sales or real estate, a lot of those things now, with a little bit of machine learning and technology automation, are simply not going to be as useful, right? So on the other side, therapists, dentists, clergy, you're probably not going to replace the clergy anytime soon with a robot. Maybe, I don't know. What do I know? But we can kind of see where the difference is, right? And what's interesting is programmers, some of the really highly paid folks like software developers and engineers, A lot of people are thinking all that programming is going to be automated away. Actors, a lot of what we can do now with 3D modeling and overlaying an actual face onto models now, the nature of filmmaking is going to be changing, right? It already has. So, but one other note about this is others would argue that the jobs themselves, the folks may not be completely disrupted, but the nature of what they do. Some of those tasks are being removed, and then we have free time for these other more important tasks, right? So the question that we have, no matter if we're an employer, if we're hiring, if we're working, is what do those tasks look like for my industry? Can I get ahead of that? Do I need new skills, in order to be relevant, right? Or do I need to train my workforce for that? And then finally, robots, wicked cool robots. Has everybody seen at least one video of one of these robots? Right, it looks like a dog and it's jumping over, backflipping off of rock walls and stuff. Or the guy that's trying to knock a robot down and it literally can't because the robot's too dexterous. So hopefully they don't become self-aware anytime soon, right? But we actually have robotics that's rather incredible, right? And this is just the first early stages of what I would consider, traditional robots. We actually see some deployment of robots that don't quite look like this as basic security forces in malls and other areas now, right? Not RoboCop yet, right? But that we take those first steps before we're understanding, before we really understand the implications, right? We're going to test in a lot of different areas, and we'll find out what's actually really adding value, what's not creeping out customers, and then we'll continue to iterate. So we have delivery now. We have retail checkout pretty much now everywhere. Mobile robotics, where they can move around, that's the future for sure. And that's just automation, right? And how we might be disrupted by automation. So again, when we're thinking about disruption, thinking about your job, thinking about your company, thinking about the company you want to build, are you planning for this? Or is it going to steamroll right over top of your existing company? Or are you going to be able to take advantage of this while others aren't because you have a unique market insight? Let's talk about augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality, and then this, which is actually some totally different thing because there's no projection. It's like within. It's so cool. Let's talk about what they mean first. So hopefully you can see this. Is Mike Cashin tweeting at me? Is that my tweet going off? So the first step here, for the first image here is virtual reality, right? And that's completely immersive. I put my virtual reality rig on, and I'm seeing an entirely different space, right? Think of the Matrix. You're jacking into the Matrix, and you have an entirely different world to be in, right? It could be all black with a thing in front, whatever. Some people would call virtual reality the 360-degree videos, like you could drop in and see a video of a band or something like that. You can't move around in it, so it's pretty limited, but it's immersive. In other words, all you're seeing is that environment. Augmented reality. Here, you see the robot. He's in front of the furniture. And that robot is, the digital representation of that robot is an overlay over our existing world. And a good example of that would be Pokemon Go, right? And so a lot of times in Pokemon, you can see the little thing popping up on your screen. Most of the time when we see augmented reality, right now it's on our screens, in our phones or our tablets or something like that. Although we do have some devices which we're introducing augmented reality, and we have new devices coming out. This is a Google Glass. Raise your hand if you had Google Glass. Where's Dawn? Thank you. All right. So us three spent a lot of money and time playing with this technology that I literally left in a drawer for 2 years and just found the other day. But the cool thing about this, and what's important to understand for augmented reality for most of our devices right now, is there's some sort of screen out front, right? It could be a wraparound glasses. It could be a little screen that's projecting, whatever. But it's in between our eyes and the world, and it's kind of overlaying something to introduce a new thing that doesn't exist, this virtual object into our world. But it's mixed in with our world. So the third component there, and it's got the Magic Leap logo because they're trying to brand themselves as something completely different from virtual reality, augmented reality. A lot of people would call it mixed reality. And that's that third option here. And you notice how the robot is actually behind the couch. And that's when that digital world element can interact with the real world, right? So if I had a virtual Coke and I spilled it on the real desk, it would virtually pour water off the desk because it knows the context of that desk and that it's a physical parameter, right? And so you can create games where I would bounce a ball off a wall and I could create a virtual version of some crazy version of volleyball here, right, or racquetball or something like that, because the virtual environment can interact with the physical environment. And so with Magic Leap, which they just announced relatively recently, it's actually also basically a pair of glasses with a very smart computer and a lot of cameras. The difference being, instead of a screen that has this digital piece that you're perceiving, it's actually creating its own light field that's exactly the same as the light field. All this light is what I have perception from, right? It's just color coming in. And all my perception of the entire world is entirely based on light bouncing off of all of you and coming into my eyes. So what Magic Leap is doing is basically creating that same light effect and sending it directly into my eyes. So instead of a screen in between, it's actually determining all the different objects in real time and sending that light into my eyes, so it makes it feel real. Right? It doesn't feel artificial at all. Theoretically, I haven't tried them on. So that's mixed reality. All of this is here today in some version. So first generation virtual reality, well, that's Oculus, that's Vive, that's PlayStation virtual reality, right? That all exists now. There's a really cool group of folks just down the street that are generating games for these platforms. What we don't have quite yet, or they're just starting to come out with, I bet there were a few in CES this week, are what are haptic suits or equipment. What haptic means is a physical response, right? So it's not just the visual of perceiving the world, but a haptic glove, for example, I could feel the pressure of someone shaking my hand, right? Or I could feel a temperature change or any other kind of physical sensation. And so people are working on haptic suits. And so now it's able to measure my entire body movement and not just the pivoting of my head, right? And I can actually feel the punch in the chest when I'm sparring with my brother who's out in California or whatever that is, right? So this haptic equipment, super early stages, probably not very good, but that's how we get better. And then the content and worlds. This is where it's a work in progress. We do have content. We've got Skyrim in virtual reality, right? We've got Fallout has been converted into a VR world that you can play in modest quality, so for game-wise. But we don't have the killer VR apps, in my opinion, quite yet. That's still to come, right? And that's because I think we're still in this early first-gen version of really all of this. But that's coming too. So raise your hand if you know what this is. You guys are the cool people. All right. So this is a screenshot from an up-and-coming movie called Ready Player One. And Ready Player One is a movie coming out in, I think, March that I could not be more excited about. Directed by Steven Spielberg. The whole concept is what happens when he's got a haptic glove and the VR becomes so good that everyone stays in the virtual world. So in this case, he's kind of living out of a van because it becomes a dystopian society pretty quick. He's living out of a van, basically, and he goes to school, right? Why have schools everywhere when you can have online education with rigid systems to protect, and prevent you from doing all kinds of stuff and so on and so forth? So he checks into school with this gear. Everybody works in their virtual world, right? The virtual world has become the new world. And this is a really fascinating, fun movie and book exploring that concept. It's been explored before with a book called Snow Crash, which some of you might have read as well. Also a little dystopian. Maybe, I don't know why that is. Maybe it's just to go hand in hand, right? Virtual reality and dystopian futures. But if you're really into 80s pop culture, and or interested in what our virtual future looks like, I would recommend checking this out. And I really think that once this movie comes out, we're going to see a lot of really inspired people building all kinds of amazing stuff and the next generation of equipment. So what are the implications for virtual reality and augmented reality? Well, there's the ability to live and work online, your mixed world full-time, right? So am I working in an environment where I'm seeing my peers all around me in my real world, but they're actually all in their own virtual worlds as well, right? Do I have to have a meeting? Can I have a meeting in person where we're not all in person? that's better than a video conferencing, right? Our entertainment sphere, our medical sphere, which is really interesting, and we're really only touching mostly on entertainment here, but in the medical world, there's been a lot of folks studying getting folks to move again and be social again, and the use of virtual reality for that. And actually, like studies for burn victims and putting them in immersive, cool environments, and how their perception of pain has altered because of that, right? And I mean, if you think about our elder population and the epic loneliness that so many of them experience, and how their studies have been shown about how they're able to affect that with technology like that too. You know, you start thinking about all the different industries and innovate that could be impacted by some of this technology, and it becomes really exciting. I'll talk about one in the future, which is to autonomous cars, and we're going to really go deep in autonomous cars, so we don't have time to do deep in everything. We want to touch base on a lot of it, though. And then one last piece, and do I have time? Yeah. So one last item here, and this is a real time, which taps into our cryptocurrency talks, which is why I wanted to touch base with it here. There's a new project that has just been launched in 2017 called Decentraland. And it's a project I was following, and I'm pretty excited about if it works. It's a huge bet. But basically, they're using cryptocurrency, Ethereum in this case, with their own token. So they did an ICO. And the blockchain, and we'll talk about blockchain in a minute. But a blockchain is a shared database everybody has access to, right? So everybody knows, everybody has access to the same things, right? And they use that blockchain to dictate virtual world. And so I own this 100 by 100 meter square of virtual space, and I can do whatever I want in that space. I could lease it to someone else. I could have a disco and charge admission. I could change my entire gravity and physics for that world for however I want to do it, right? And so they had this amazing idea to do open sourced virtual reality on the blockchain and raised $30 million in 30 seconds of their financing, which is worth far more now because the value of the currencies have all gone up, right? So, and they've got real prototypes. That is not just a white paper that was a dream. They've actually got functional working world and model and code, and it's all done in JavaScript. Like anybody that knows JavaScript could create their own virtual world and drop it into this open source environment. So this is where we start blending over, right? Is the blockchain, the shared database of knowledge that everybody has access to, the environment where we create that online virtual world that we can all experience and have a shared platform. Very interesting stuff. One of the things about disruptive technology is it often requires multiple different disruptive techs at the same time, or convergence of multiple different technologies in order for it to make it effective, right? We couldn't do Decentraland if we didn't have powerful GPUs, right? And if we didn't have blockchain and we didn't have virtual reality gear already kind of leveled up, you had to wait for that environment before all these other things got created first. Let's talk about cryptocurrency. Raise your hand if you own at least a little bit of Bitcoin, Dash, Ethereum, or something else. All right, so New Hampshire's pretty hip, not surprised. Some of you didn't raise your hand because you don't want to be mugged when you walk out. When it comes to cryptocurrency, you know, Bitcoin is still the big player, and you probably have all heard of Bitcoin at this point. Has anybody not heard of cryptocurrency or Bitcoin? One of you is ashamed and just won't really raise your hand. That's okay. So let's talk about it a little bit. I did a screenshot today here of the total market cap for all cryptocurrency, right? So that's Bitcoin, it's Litecoin, it's all these other tokens, and all kinds of stuff. There's a lot that has been created in the last few years, especially this year. So excuse me, 1 year ago today, the entire market cap for all cryptocurrency was about $16 billion. That's pretty good. 1 year later, today, the market cap, it fluctuated a little bit today. It was kind of a crazy day. But as of around noon today, the market cap was $500 billion. So cryptocurrency as a whole has gotten a lot of investment and interest, right? A lot of speculation. There's real value there too. It's really hard to determine the difference. It takes a lot of research. But what does that mean? Why do we care? Like obviously there's people passionate about it. There's a lot of money being thrown into it. But what are what can we do about it, and what are the basics of it so we know what to do. I'll just show one other thing here too. If you take a look at the market cap of all cryptocurrency, it's above Facebook and just barely above or below Amazon. Now, market cap is kind of a funny thing. You can't take a market cap of a cryptocurrency and compare it to market cap of a company because they're two different animals, but it's still fun to look at, right? So let's think about the nature of what we typically have for a computing environment. That's a centralized environment, right? So I'm going to post a tweet about how awesome this talk is, or Mike does, and he goes on to Twitter, and he uploads a photo, and he types in some words, and he hits send, and that's going out to Twitter's servers. It's got a bunch, right? But there's a central point that's operating that entire network. Twitter goes down, Twitter gets blocked in Iran or North Korea or whatever, and it's done. You can't, Twitter as a whole is done. So with cryptocurrency, what enables the cryptocurrency is what's called a blockchain. And that's think of it like a shared database. It's technically a ledger, right? So it's a list of credits and debits where everybody has an account. So it's a shared ledger account that we can all have access to. And so because it's shared, we all have access to the database. It's also living in places all over the world. Like it's a global mesh of all the nodes that are running all these cryptocurrencies. So it's decentralized. So if I want to stop Bitcoin, I could take out your computer because I know you've got one, but that doesn't do anything to the network, right? I can't block it in any country or any state. I can't regulate it in that regard at all. Now, I could regulate the providers that are allowing you to buy and sell, right? I could do other things like that, but I can't. The nature of the network itself is such that it's distributed. And because it's distributed to everybody, that enables a lot of really important properties. That's the innovation that's fueling the value. So let's talk about that distribution and why that's important. This is how we transact money right now, most of the time, most of us. You might think that whole, and you don't have to read the words because you don't want to, believe me. But what this is the operation for authorizing a credit card transfer, the clearing of that credit card transfer, and the settlement of that credit card transfer, right, for making a purchase. There's a lot of parties involved. There's a lot of steps and engagement. It's amazing it goes as quickly as it does. It's super complicated, right? And every step along the way, I trust that Kristen is going to do the job she's assigned to in that. And I've got a contract that stipulates all the reasons I'm going to be upset, right, if she doesn't. And so on 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 and so on. And so we have this trust environment that's required. In a distributed ledger of a blockchain, we don't need the trust anymore. It's called trustless. Everybody has access to all the information. So when I post to the ledger that I've given Kristen $10 worth of Bitcoin for my half of the pizza today, everyone sees that there's a transaction from one wallet to another. It doesn't have to have our names attached, but one wallet to another for that amount. So everybody now knows I have less of my Bitcoin and Kristen has more, right? And so that blockchain, that shared database of knowledge, means that you don't have to trust this black box system that company X has that transfers information to this other black box system that company Y has that goes in this chain back and forth that they're not doing any number of things, right? And that enables us to do a lot of different things. And it also allows us to do some really innovative new things because it doesn't just have to be about money. And in fact, there's a lot of really interesting cryptocurrency. You call it cryptocurrency, but it's just tokens, right? It's just a knowledge database of information. And once it's shared to everybody, we can do amazing things. The reason why we have value attached to it for some of these projects is simply to encourage folks to participate in the network, right? There's a value for participating in the network that might be monetary. Sometimes it's not necessarily monetary. So let's take a look at a couple examples. The one on the left, Kodak, is now getting into the cryptocurrency thing. So this is the Kodak miner. It's to mine Bitcoin, and they were selling it and promoting it at CES. It's a horrible deal, in my opinion. But But modern companies now, a lot of them, are identifying this opportunity and trying to find ways to reinvent themselves. So Kodak's getting into that, but they're also created their own cryptocurrency, Kodak Coin. And what's interesting is there actually is some interesting value in what they're trying to achieve. For a very long time, if you took a photo and you posted to the internet, everyone had access to your photo, right? You can try to put a watermark on it, you can try to track it and get it back, or please ask for attribution, or it's a beautiful piece of art, and now people are using it on their own and all these different websites. So with a blockchain, we can actually manage digital rights, right? So I have the ability, theoretically, to say that I have license and access to this photo because I hired the photographer, Dan, to photograph my wedding, right? But no one else has access to that unless I want to transfer via contract, and blockchains can actually have programming languages built in to build complicated contracts. I can create a contract that says I allow you to have access to that for 6 months, and it comes back to me, or in perpetuity. This blockchain could not be about digital rights management of photos. It could be a digital, a shared ledger of deeds to homes, and an easy way to backtrack all the deeds for all time, right? We could have a blockchain that has anonymized health information in real time shared across for everybody, such that people who are analyzing the information might be able to identify flu outbreaks on a very focused geography over a very short period of time in real time, instead of having disparate databases from all the different hospitals trying to share information. You might be able to identify patterns that we never thought we'd identify before with machine learning, right? Once we have these shared databases, we can do any number of things. One of the things we can do is CryptoKitties, right? Raise your hand if you have a CryptoKitty. Come on. It's just me? Okay. These are not my CryptoKitties. I just took a screenshot of somebody else's because they were cuter than mine. But CryptoKitties is the first consumer app that's leveraging the blockchain, in my opinion. There's others where you might be able to buy and sell goods that might be in dark markets or things like that. But for the first that was widely adopted by people that have no idea what cryptocurrency is, but wanted to buy and trade kitties and breed them, this was the first app that really brought the masses, a lot of people, to cryptocurrency. And the thing about CryptoKitties is, it's just a series of like 5 contracts on the Ethereum network. And so one of the contracts is, I want to buy a kitty. In fact, I have to buy 2. And then one of the contracts is, I want to breed these 2 cats. And there's a genome, there's code in every cat. It's like 4 billion permutations, just like our genome, not just like it, but conceptually, that says what the chances are for new attributes to the cat. So I bred this cat, and the contract says that these cats are a certain age, and they've bred a number of times, and so it's going to take 5 hours, but then that cat's going to be ready, and then I check back online, and I see I have a 3rd cat that I can name, and Mr. Purrington, and that new cat is really cute, right, and he has a really rare attribute, and so Kristen's like, I want that cat. So in CryptoKitties, with our blockchain, again with a contract, I can say, all right, I will sell that cat to you for $10 in Ethereum. And people are doing this so much that the Ethereum network was just flooded. Like just flooded. It was overnight sensation, right? Companies were buying CryptoKitties and posting them on their Twitter profiles and stuff. It became the new sensation until literally the network couldn't handle it anymore, right? Because we hadn't had that level of consumer interest and transaction use. So we learned a ton, we being whoever, or all the smart people that are actually working on the protocols, not me. But we learned a ton about real world use and how that virality can change and how we have to change to be able to scale, right? We learned a lot about best practices, not best practices for development too. So anyway, CryptoKitties, really stupid, right? But any number of stupid things that people are obsessed with, lots, right? Let's talk about another disruptive innovation. This is where we're going to spend a little bit more time focusing on, is self-driving cars. Who owns a self-driving car? I don't. Okay. None of us do yet. But in my opinion, it's one of the technologies that most people think is way down the line and is coming much faster and is probably the most disrupting for the average person than any other that we're going to talk about, probably. It also includes, it's a convergence of a lot of different disrupting technologies at once. Batteries, electric vehicles, machine learning. So let's get a sense of what an autonomous car is. There's a scale. So when you read about autonomous cars that people are announcing, you don't have to read it. It might get more complicated, but it's really pretty simple, right? There's no automation is zero, and it's fully autonomous, and you could literally be sleeping for 5 days and would function on its own is 5, right? And there's steps in between. So a level 2 autonomous car can steer, accelerate, and decelerate, at least in certain periods. And that would be the Tesla in autopilot mode, right? You don't do that all the time, but if you're driving down the highway, you can set it in autopilot mode, and you don't have to be accelerating and decelerating and stuff, and steer. It'll actually steer around things if there's a problem. Now, you want to pay attention, because this is first-gen technology, literally, right? But as we get smarter and smarter, then more and more the machine can take over for us, right? So we're already here. You might think, all right, maybe in 15, 20 years we'll be here, level 5 or level 4. The reality is it's actually coming much faster. So this is a Chrysler CEO saying the widest spread adoption of level 4 autonomy is within 10 years. And half of our cars are going to be electric by 2025, which isn't that far away, right? Not far at all. Half of our cars are going to be electric. And that was a year ago. I bet that he would modify this statement now. So just 2 days ago, GM announced to the world their no driver, no pedals, no steering wheel car will be launched in 2019. 2019, level 4. That's GM. It's because they bought out, like most of these companies aren't building it themselves. Remember the disruption? They identify the disruptions coming down. It's completely obvious this is coming, and it's going to destroy any car company that isn't adapted to it. So they're buying all these startups that are really smart people building this and merging it with their ability to make it, right? So Tesla's trying to do both. That's super hard. GM says, let's just hire the smartest people already solve the problem. We know how to build it, and this is how we're going to take over the market. What's interesting about the GM model, and actually it's going to be about all of the models, which we'll get to in more detail here, they're not selling these cars to you and I. These are going to be fleets that you command, much like an Uber, right? So the driving in the future is going to be me pushing a button, or you're scheduling it. I don't have to push a button, right? Why do that when it can be automated? Where the car literally comes, I get in, it drops me at work, and then it goes off and takes care of the next person. And I've got some fractional ownership or subscription service or whatever that is. And that could be Lyft or Uber or Ford or Avis or whatever, right? So Toyota and Nissan say they're going to be all autonomous by 2020. Ford, Lyft, and BMW are saying 21. The futurists that are smarter than I are saying we probably will have laws that prevent non-autonomous in most environments not that far out, right? Because then it becomes actually a real safety thing. And I took the slides out here. I have a whole talk specifically about this. But safety is a real problem. Every 7 seconds, there's a hospital level injury every 7 seconds due to distracted driving in our country, right? So motorcycles probably are going to exist with that too. They'll be autonomous, right? Everything will be autonomous, right? But it's a good question. And when autonomous vehicles start deploying, it's not going to be everywhere right away, right? They're not going to be in the back roads with dirt roads and stuff. They're going to be in geographically fenced-in areas where it's known and safe and allowed, like legally and all that. I believe there's legislation here in New Hampshire to address it for next year, I think, to allow it or something like that. I haven't followed it very closely. So what does that all mean for autonomous cars? Well, it's speculated that 80% of people who own cars now will not own cars in the future, right? My wife drives so much, it might make sense for her to own her own car. She basically has an office in her car. She drives hours, one way every day. So that might make sense. But for most of us, what the experts are saying, because of the cost of electric vehicles being cheaper, because they last so much longer, because the cost of electricity is less than that of gas, and the maintenance, they have 20 moving parts versus how many in an engine right now, right? That the cost of subscribing to an electronic car service will be cheaper than me with my already paid off car operating. So it'll just make sense just to stop and just go with a service. So most people, they'll actually save up to $5,000 a year just switching over to a model like this, right? So auto ownership and cost. If you're a car dealer, that really sucks, right? How many people are building out new car dealerships right now? And what does that industry look like? And if you're a bank, are you lending to car dealerships right now? Some hard questions right there, right? That's a really good question. And actually, pause that, and we'll talk about it in the municipal slide, because there's a lot of questions. There's so many variables changing, it's really hard to know for sure yet. Right. Insurance. So insurance sector could be very different, right? If we're not having as many car accidents or any car accidents, and who buys the insurance? If I'm subscribing to a fleet, I'm not paying for the insurance anymore, right? And so there's a lot fewer contracts to write, probably a lot fewer people needing to work in the field to write them. Parking and traffic, not related to your question, but it's somewhat related. If you can't tell from these photos here, these are people eating in the streets, right? So this is a new trend in a lot of cities where they're before you go and remodel an entire street, you change the environment temporarily, sort of this modern urban design. And so you're putting people out in the streets and taking over a few parking spaces, and you're finding out how that changes the dynamics. Turns out it slows everybody down, everybody's just happier, right? In a lot of places, we need that parking right now, but that's not necessarily the case moving forward. So that impacts our parking revenue, right? Parking revenue contributes to the general fund of most cities. In other words, your taxes are lower because of all the meters we're running here. And we have these meters ostensibly because we want to create turnover. We don't want people parking there for 8 hours, right? But in reality, if people want to park here and shop for 2 hours and then eat for another 2 hours, we shouldn't make them move in the middle. There's a really different, in a lot of municipalities now, there's a different mindset in how parking really ought to operate and the turnover concept, with the exception of some 15-minute spots. And so, but at some point in the future, the market, we won't need to be subsidizing that parking spaces. We're charging so much for them, and we can be using it for something else. In a lot of cities, 30 to 40% of the space in the city is paved over parking. We don't think about it, but it's all these parking garages, it's all the empty parking lots surrounding it, it's all the strips that often take up just as much land as the road itself that we're giving away to have a car parked for 90+% of the time, right? Rental car companies and taxis, right? Who's going to start a new taxi business right now? Doesn't seem like a good. So Uber's business model is really just the same, right? It's not a whole lot different, but they're adapting new technology to really disrupt that model at a massive scale, right? So again, this is not a whole huge different business model. And you could say the same of Airbnb, right? It's just renting space. People have rented space in apartments and hotels and all kinds of stuff for a very long time. They just adapted a new business model because they were enabled to based on the new technologies available, right? So Google signed in a partnership with Avis. Avis stock goes up immediately because if you're a rental car company, what does your future look like? Unless you're partnered, and all of a sudden you're now a fleet management system. And where do those fleets have to charge? Probably in big fleet stations. Big parking lots, parking garages, right? What we don't know, to answer part of that question though, is we don't know what the cars are going to be doing during the day. Are they just circling the streets empty, waiting for us or not? So municipalities are actually, I'll get to you in a second, the municipalities are actually considering charging based amount of time that a car is active in a downtown, whether it's active with a person or not. So we don't have meters anymore, but we're still subsidizing the streets for you for free, so you can operate your business, so you need to pay back into the system, right? Yes?
But if you imagine that the typical car is idle today 90% of the time, that means there are much fewer vehicles than we have right now. So
Right.
that's going to, the number of vehicles that they dictate can go down dramatically. There's going to be peak times.
Yes. You'll absolutely have peak times, but probably the number of vehicles that we need will be far fewer. We just don't know that it's going to change traffic patterns. It might actually increase traffic congestion in certain places where there's just a lot of back and forth because it's a road that people are going back and forth on, right? And you're summoning a shuttle, so there's a lot of additional driving going on. And we just don't know how that whole dynamic's going on. Mike had a question. So Mike was saying basically Uber and Lyft have pool programs that have very smart computers using machine learning to figure out the best algorithms to pool those people together, right? To make that even more efficient than it was before. We'll get to the machine learning in a little bit, but that's again another component of another disruptive technology that's being added here that allows something as massive as autonomous cars to happen in the first place. Trucking. This is, Tesla has already announced their trucks, self-driving trucks look really cool. Lots and lots and lots of people have already, put down money for them. It's one of the largest truck drivers are one of the largest groups of employer in most states. And they're one of the first that are probably going to be disrupted because there's so much driving involved, right? Mechanic, your car mechanic. And how does that change in an autonomous car? The engine is certainly different. It's far fewer parts. They say, we haven't had them for terribly long, that electric cars will last 2 to 4 times as long as a traditional car, right? There's a lot fewer moving parts. And the parts that they have might be more snap-on in relation to what we might be experiencing in the past. Well, there's opportunity for what we're doing in the cars, right? If the car is driving itself, we're not going to be, are we listening to the radio anymore? Right? What does that mean for New Hampshire Public Radio or any of the other radio stations? And how are they going to change their engagement with their listeners or viewers or whatever that new thing is going to be? And so maybe there's opportunity there for entertainment. Maybe the virtual reality world first really takes hold in these entertainment cars, right? You can be a subscriber and get the basic stock car that's just going to drop you off, or you can have a more deluxe model that has surrounded in speakers and screens and virtual reality headsets and all the other stuff that you might be for that long haul drive that you're going to do, right? Gas stations. Gas stations is really interesting. Its whole model is you're going to stop for a short period, and you're probably going to go in and maybe use the restroom, but you're going to pick up cigarettes or soda or beef jerky or whatever it is you're going to get at the gas station, right? But with autonomous cars, you're not stopping necessarily unless you need gas, electricity. The electricity takes longer. You're not fueling up so fast. So the dynamic of your experience with these stations is going to be different. In fact, we're seeing new iterations of very kind of gourmet-looking gas stations that I think that are coming out as a result. And will the charging stations be implemented in any number of other places? They don't have to be dispensing gas anymore, right? So City Hall in Portsmouth has a charging station right there. All the parking garages have charging stations, not for all the spots, but a few. And we know that demand is going to only increase over time with electric cars, right? So what does that mean for a gas station or that sort of thing? What are the opportunity, and do you really want to buy into one right now? So law enforcement. Revenue. That's a huge component of revenue, right? Tickets. And how you enforce and how you staffed for traffic enforcement anymore. And how can you enhance the experience? So there's a screenshot here of a cop pulled over an autonomous car because it was driving too slowly. It's kind of funny to me, right? But we have fewer accidents. We're probably not going to have the speeding like we've had. Once we're in a fully autonomous car world, we don't have intersections with lights. Maybe we do in heavy pedestrian areas, but we don't need them for most other places, right? Like a lot of what we would think our daily experience of seeing police officers is probably going to change. And the role that they play will be different. Do we need as many, and so on and so forth. Legal professionals. Raise your hand if you're a lawyer. Oh, sorry. So 35% of all civil trials in 2005 were vehicle collisions, right? So what does that mean if you're in that field, that specific field? Lounging, right? So if I'm driving cross country, do I need to stay at that Holiday Inn Express in a little tiny town in Nebraska? Nope. There's a lot, not so much out here. Well, there's probably around here too. It's interesting how the dynamics change. There's a lot of lodging establishments in the middle of nowhere purely because of the dynamics of cross-country travel, right? And those are going to change. You simply won't need them anymore. And again, if you do go to them, it's because of the experience, right? I'm going to travel to somewhere because of the experience, and I want to stay at a cool experience. We're going to be very much more experience-driven. Airlines and airports. Do I really need to fly to New York now? Right? Or something a little bit further, Philly. I could drive. If I get in an autonomous car at night and wake up in the morning, what do I care? Mark? Right. So for those at home, Mark brought up the point that once you're in fully autonomous, right, there's no other else but autonomous cars, you don't have to have speed limits the way we have them now, right? And certainly but they're also going to adhere to them. And so they're actually going to go the speed limit as opposed to all of us that speed anyway, or at least the two people in the room that I know speed. So group transport, right, that would be Lyft and Uber and everybody else. If you wonder why it's so important for Uber to not have employees but to have contractors that are doing all the work, it's because they don't want to have to fire all their employees, right? They can slowly shift that as they take over autonomous markets. They're already operating in Philadelphia, right? There's autonomous vehicles operating in Vegas, in huge 100,000+ people communities in Florida and in California and Phoenix, right? Shipping and delivery and retail. So I'll just read it really quick out of this. Mobile shopping might be the most transformative force in retail today, but self-driving cars could change retail as much as smartphones, right? Why do I need to go out and buy that pound of fertilizer when I can push a button and some autonomous drone-y, car-y type of thing can come and bring it to me? There are whole grocery stores that are now testing this model where the robots do all the picking for me and I can just go pick it up. But the next stage after that is I just walk out in the morning and they've dropped off my boxes full of groceries for me, right? And there's nobody having to touch it the whole transformation all the way through. We don't know how all this is going to shape out, and it might not shape out at the same time, but the whole idea of retail is going to be very, very different. So there's some opportunity too. This is Benedict Evans again, and I thought this was a really interesting post a couple years now at this point. Self-driving cars will create as many millionaires in real estate as retail and tech, right? We buy our homes, we live in rental units and stuff because of certain geographic distance, right? Out of convenience. I want to be able to walk to my pub and back and not worry about driving. There's all kinds of dynamics at play. But we might change our behavior and what we find preferable for where we live once this technology is introduced. And I don't think we know how those dynamics are working yet. Right? All right, next topic is machine learning. I thought it was a cute picture, so I threw it in there. So let's talk a little bit about some examples of machine learning. So here's one. Machine learning is as much about analyzing visual information as it is about analyzing data that streams in hard text data. So here, if you're an autonomous vehicle, you need to know whether that's a bike or something in motion versus a stationary tree versus a car, right? It has different behaviors that you need to understand what those behaviors are so you know how to deal with them on the road, right? So in this case, our software right now can easily determine all three things. It's a person on a bike, and because it knows those two things exist simultaneously in the same zone. But we also have, so this is more classification. Dog, kid, chair. This already exists, right? In Google Photos, which I have all my photos just uploaded to Google Photos now on the cloud, I type in meeting, And it comes up with groups of people in office environments for me automatically. It's figured out that that's a meeting, right? I type in yellow chair, and it can find a yellow chair that I took a photo of 2 years ago, because I can't remember the date and time anymore, right? So it's already able to calculate all these things. Face recognition, that's how our iPads are able to identify us when we try to sign on now. All of the speech and language processing, right, from Google Home or Nest or whatever, not Nest. Well, maybe it's built in Nest now too, I don't know. Medical imaging, right? So much smarter, faster analytics based on best practice of previous understood medical diagnosis and scans than any doctor could possibly do. And it's not because the doctor's not as smart as a computer, but the doctor can't process 500,000 different scans of a tumor and the outcomes of what each person had done to them and how long they lived to come up with the best practice, right? So the machine learning can understand all these new correlations that we may not have even perceived before. Ideally, we're double checking all that, but the machine learning is enabling all kinds of things in that regard. And video recommendations or understanding seismic activity and so on and so forth. It can also do some really creepy, crazy stuff. So this is actually computers having you look at a face, and then the machine figures out what face you're looking at. It's understanding, we're getting to the ability now where our computers can understand what we're thinking. Not in any real depth, but that's crazy, right? That feels like science fiction. And we're not that far away. It used to be that they could kind of figure out a shape. Is that a circle or a triangle or something? And we're getting much, much, much better. So there's lots of different use cases for machine learning. Patient diagnostics, fraud detection, any kind of anomaly detection. And that could be, like, there's a lot of, that covers over into security as well, right? Intrusion detection and security. Demand forecasting. This is why, this is how a lot of this is replacing our traditional office worker, right, or knowledge worker, because the machine learning is capable of processing and understanding this in much deeper, faster ways. And again, finding those correlations and creating new opportunity with them. So it's one of the areas that's in super huge demand, right? If you are a software engineer and you start studying machine learning, you're going to be in big demand. Also, if you know about autonomous cars, right? So, this is near the end. How did I do for time? What are we doing? 7:08, not bad. This is the end of our talk, so I'm going to leave you this. Are you planning for today and what we understand the world is today? Are you planning for what you can perceive or what we all perceive the world will be in the future? And that's for your own personal life, right? For your career you have now. That's for the company you're going to start. It's for the business you have already invested all of your life and money into. Are you ready? So, let's wrap it up and see if we have any questions. Yes?
Question on the cryptocurrency.
Crypto, yep.
Something I heard was that the amount of, in any of the blockchain technology, the amount of energy and that is an aspect of it that has to take into account. How does that fit?
So the question is, with cryptocurrency, uses enormous amounts of energy to process the transactions, and how do we think about that, like, as a society, right? And account for that as a hidden sunk cost or a cost that's not being attributed properly. And so the answer is that's absolutely true now of some cryptocurrency, right? Bitcoin is a really good example, and it takes enormous amounts of electricity to process a transaction. And these processing of transactions are important because it's validating the transaction that I made. So if I submit a transaction saying I gave $10 to you, right, and that transaction has to be validated by everybody else to make sure I'm not double spending it. I gave it to you and you at the same time, and I snuck it in a double spend. Transactions are actually processing all of that. And you get rewarded for processing those transactions through mining a potential of a little bit of cryptocurrency back, right? And it's all very algorithmic and how much is ever going to be released at any given time over a period of time. So what's happened is, in a race to earn more and more of that cryptocurrency for doing transactions, we're creating better and better, smarter and smarter mining computers. and they burn a lot of electricity. It's just inherent in the process. And so there's entire server rooms processing this. Turns out Netflix takes a lot of electricity too. Anything that's actually on servers takes a lot of electricity. So it's going to have to be reckoned with, and there are people that are coming up with ideas on how to reckon with that. Turns out though, there are some cryptocurrencies which do not have that as an issue. In fact, there are some cryptocurrencies where there's no mining at all. Ryblocks, IoT, and others, where all the currency already exists. And in fact, in one of the models, instead of computers really processing hard to validate a transaction, in order for me to send out a transaction, I have to validate 2 other transactions. And we're all self-validating each other's transactions, so my natural horsepower, my regular computer that's already on, is already taking care of that. And so the incremental cost in electricity should be relatively nil, right? So there's lots of different approaches. What we don't know with cryptocurrency is, and for a while people were saying who's going to win. In other words, there's only ever going to be one cryptocurrency and everybody else is going to fall away. But now what we know is there's probably lots of different use cases which require different kinds of crypto technology, and that's okay. And so those are going to evolve over time, as we understand how we're using them and the real-world implications of a theoretical white paper from years ago. We can adapt for that, either in technology or in the software.
So with the cryptocurrency, such as like Bitcoin or some of the other ones, do you see potentially the value of the dollar decreasing and Bitcoin kind of, taking that space?
Actually, the value of the dollar went down today. The stock market went up, and cryptocurrency took a huge nosedive. Yeah. So I think, here's my speculation. I am not the smartest person, perhaps in the room about this, but definitely not the smartest person in the state about this or the world. The value of the dollar is going to go up and down based on the real value of the dollar, right? People have been thinking it will have dropped for a long time, and it hasn't, but that doesn't mean it won't in the future, or go up depending on any number of trade issues that we're creating, right, in a changing political landscape that we have right now. The value of cryptocurrency and the use of cryptocurrency would have to be many orders of magnitude different in order to have that kind of impact. It's not to say that it won't. Maybe in some world in the future, Star Trek world, right, we're all trading in credits. We don't even call it cryptocurrency anymore. We don't call it anything. It's just money at that point, right? I mean, what is money? We can go back, way back to what money is. We were trading in giant stones for a while, right? We traded in shells. Money is just a unit of transfer, right? And so it's entirely possible that there could be correlation, but I don't think we're going to see it anytime soon. Don.
Is this working? Josh, one of my bucket list items is to drive the Kankamagas in a Mini with a stick. Okay?
You're going to be allowed to do that on a specialized track, and you're going to get charged $50 an hour to do it.
But that's where I see the real problem. It's the same thing, the early days of maps and navigation. When I used to go fishing up in northern Maine, somewhere just north of Bangor or whatever is where everything went away.
Right.
Okay? And it didn't work. The world is still not mapped.
Oh, yeah.
I can't imagine the world ever being totally mapped.
Yeah.
And you're not going to have 5G everywhere.
It's true. There's a lot of barriers for fully autonomous cars operating everywhere, like right away, right? And so part of it is going to be people want their old classic car. They want to be able to drive that. And so it's going to be a very long time for the intermingling of the autonomous and non-autonomous. It just is going to be. Until the point where you having the pleasure of driving your old beater car that you love so much but isn't very safe puts everybody else at risk, and society, perhaps society says, no, sorry, Don, no, right? You need to go in special geo-zoned areas that are allowed for that, where people have signed a death warrant before they went in and did, like whatever it is going to require for that, right? But theoretically, yes, wait. All right. Any more questions? No more questions? This is too easy. It's all about crypto. Oh, sorry. We'll get to that. No, we'll get to that.
Bigger picture, I have a question for you. I mean, you talked about some enterprises, organizations that just got steamrolled. Mm-hmm. What would you say today to maybe a mid-size or even a mature, smaller company, how they get ready for this? What do? Do they hire a chief disruption officer? Do they go acquire startups?
Right.
Do they come and talk to somebody like you? I mean, what would you say to somebody who was in here who had spent 30 years building a company and was very stable and happy, and maybe was even a little bit resentful about all of this? Now you tell me I got to change with all of this stuff.
You bet. Yeah, I totally get that. You know, it's funny. Everything always changes, right? Mountains are changing over a glacial period of time, but we like the change. We love that Portsmouth has changed so much that it's become a destination, or all the cleaning up that's happened in downtown Manchester, until you have a stake in it, and then stop changing, please, because I got it for this specific thing, right? Totally get it. And so I think the answer, as all answers always are, is it sort of depends on the specific nature of what you're doing and what's coming out that might impact you. But I think being aware, eyes wide open of it, frequently I think when a business is faced with that, they're either going to bring talent on, and you have a skunkworks team or somebody, right, you're bringing on that's going to be tackling this, and be aware that it's entirely possible this is going to disrupt the rest of your business, right? The intent of this might be to cannibalize the rest of the business over time, not ideally right away. Or what a lot of companies do is you acquire the other company, right? If you think about most of the cool new things that we do, that we have, those or cool features of big enterprise companies, they probably acquired that from someone else. That's how they got it, right? And that's because large enterprises are entirely geared structurally for status quo of operating really efficiently and well for what they're supposed to be doing. They're not made as startups, right? It's why the really, really smart people that operate massive organizations aren't great mentors for how to start a new company, because it's a totally different thing, right? So at the very least, you have to have some folks around you, whether that's a mentor or a friend or whatever, that understand sort of the create a new thing mentality, because it's been a while, right? And have an eye for what your industry looks like in the future, right? And then you can identify multiple paths to hopefully, find a good future. Or you just sell, right? I see the writing on the wall. This all seems like this sucks. I don't want to do this. I don't have it in me to go through this battle again. I'm going to sell my company right now and do something really cool from fresh. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Mark.
I was just going to say, to follow up on that thought, people are slow to change, and the timing of change is so uncertain. For example, most of us believe that there is climate change and that it is impacting ocean levels, and yet people are still buying property that's right on the beach. There's still plenty of transactions happening for property in Florida, but you're actually starting to read more now. It's starting to seep into the media and elsewhere about that issue, in particular in Florida, where they, are seeing houses underwater and stuff. But the question is, at what point have you waited too long, right? And that's kind of your point about a company, is you either change to, or maybe you've waited too long.
So we often get stuck in the first mover advantage is the only advantage that matters, right? But that's not necessarily the case. Facebook was not the first social media platform. Google was not the first search engine, right? There were other ad engines that existed before Google, right? And so you don't have to be the first mover. And in fact, you have a lot of institutional knowledge. You can bring that to bear and have a real opportunity, right? A competitive advantage, as long as you're doing something about it at the right time. The last thing you want to be doing in crypto or in real estate or anything else is be the last one holding the bag, right, when the market falls apart. Because no one will insure your home because you're always getting flooded. Yes, Doug?
What is Alpha Loft?
That's a really good question. And I appreciate it. Doug just asked me, what is Alpha Loft? And I realized I had talked about the strategic alliance between the two organizations, but not everybody knows what Alpha Loft is, or perhaps the High Tech Council. So thank you for that. So Alpha Loft, we are a nonprofit that is dedicated to helping founders of innovation-based, high-growth startups here in the state of New Hampshire. So for some folks, that is, I have an idea and I don't even know where to begin. For others, that is, I built the product, I launched it, I don't know how to get customers, I don't know how to grow, I don't know how to talk to investors, I don't, whatever, right? We talk to some companies that have been around for a very long time that are needing to innovate. Like there's a whole spectrum of folks that we talk to. We do it in a variety of ways. One of them is free events like this, our launch series, and we have a lot of different events. We have some lunch and learns coming up involving legal topics, right? And so you can sit down with some lawyers and not pay any money and eat some pizza and pick some brains, right? And we have one with a bank coming up too. But we also have our Startup Accelerator program, which is what I'm particularly focused on right now, which is an intense 3-month program for a select number of startups who have applied, where we go through a very rigorous program of mentorship and engagement to hopefully have a better outcome for them in a short period of time. The High Tech Council, NHTC, New Hampshire High Tech Council, is a membership organization here in the state that's been around for a good long time now, that has a lot of great events surrounding sort of the tech sphere, especially with established tech companies. And they do a number of different events like Product of the Year and entrepreneur forums, and they support a lot of different user groups and things like that as well. So, so Alpha Loft, we try to serve the whole state, but we're literally a staff at 2.5 right now. So we operate out of here in Manchester, just down the street on Elm Street, and we also have a co-working space in Portsmouth that we work out of as well. But I worked with a team from Dartmouth, last year during the accelerator, and people all over the state. And yeah, that's a great question. We do not take any equity from the startups we work with. We don't take from our startups, we help our startups. I will gladly be gifted some tokens, and Alpha Loft, and in fact, some startups have actually gifted Alpha Loft as a thank you, a very small amount of equity for aiding them, and we do appreciate that. And hopefully, when they exit for $1 billion, we'll have a little bit of an endowment, right? So, and Jason, you had a question earlier about buying parking lots for the future to house all these cars, and that's a really good question. I think a lot of municipalities are thinking about that right now. If you think about Portsmouth, I keep bringing up Portsmouth because I live in Portsmouth as a city councilor, so I'm like really keyed in on what's going on in Portsmouth, and I think it actually reflects a lot of other cities too. Portsmouth is spending $26 million on a new parking garage for like 600 cars. The average parking space in Portsmouth, and it would be true in a lot of places like Manchester as well, it costs somewhere between $20,000 and $40,000 for a parking space in a building, right? So when you require a bunch of parking for a new building, that's how much additional cost that building has just for parking cars, right, that sit there almost all the time. So the way we have zoning will change, right? The way we account for all that will change. And ideally, we shuffle them all off to these garages. And probably those garages won't be in prime downtown space anymore. Maybe you have a few that you're reusing because they already exist, right? And that might be some of the parking garages around here. But I would bet that most of the parking garages here disappear, and you only maximize the ones you need, right? And then you have prime real estate to build something that's actually more active and valuable for the city.
Actually, I had this other weird thought kind of rolling through my head. We were talking about cryptocurrency and electricity usage. I'm wondering if there's going to be an interesting opportunity for transparency about the actual cost of cryptocurrency, so different from hidden costs in a lot of our established systems today, especially because people are so concerned about the experience of things that they're involved in and its authenticity. So I don't know why that's stuck in my head right now, but it seems like that would be a huge media opportunity too of really being able to share with people, where does this come from and what does it take?
It's interesting you bring that up because the Centraland project that I mentioned before, I don't know that I have a good enough internet connection for this. I would bring it up. So Decentraland is that virtual reality blockchain mashup that's creating that virtual world that is open to everybody, right? Super transparent. They actually created a transparency dashboard just for that, where they can show how many tokens have actually been allocated to the founding team, how many have been spent, what's the vesting schedule, how much tokens have been burnt after the land purchase, all those sort of things. And they actually open source that entire transparency dashboard so other projects could take it over. And so I think over time we're going to be expecting a lot of that. On the flip side, there are cryptocurrencies whose entire purpose is to obfuscate and have privacy, right? Bitcoin is not private. We can all see every transaction, right? Once I know your wallet address, I can follow your coins forever. And so there are other cryptocurrencies that exist so that you don't have to be public with everything that you've done. And there's a lot of people that really value that, especially here in New Hampshire, right? So, so I think we're going to see simultaneously all kinds of different approaches. Yeah. Any other? Yep.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, how does Alpha Loft compare to the incubator model and also like the shared space model that you see down in Cambridge and Boston with CIC?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I would call Alpha Loft an incubator light, right? So some incubators are very formal. You sign an agreement, you work out of the space, you pay a specific fee, and people within the incubator management staff will provide you marketing services or sales services. They provide services in return. They might even take equity for that. Some are more of self-serve, right? You don't even have to work at our space. It's more like what an Alpha Loft is. You don't have to work at our space, but if you're a startup and you need help, you let us know, right? We're not going to follow and track you down and force you to talk to us so we can help you, right? But if you're needing help in one of a few different ways and you say, Josh, you know, what I really need to do is I need to find somebody to help me with growth hacking or understand inbound marketing, or I need to have somebody that's that I can talk to about this confusing part of my business model where I just can't figure out how to find a product market fit or whatever, then we set up office hours all the time for that, right? And then we all have a more formal program at the accelerator. So Alpha Loft is a little bit of a weird hybrid because we also just offer straight up co-working. We actually work with a partner co-working space, WBC, right in downtown. They have opened up brand new co-working space right on Elm Street. It's a beautiful facility. We work within it. We don't operate that one. We operate the one out of Portsmouth, though. And so we have people that literally come in and out every day, and I hardly talk to them. They're just doing their own thing. It all really depends on what the entrepreneur needs. Anybody else? Don, anybody else besides Don? Because we got to move the microphone all the way over there. There we go. Yeah, thank you, Don. We try really hard to create a community, right? A lot of what people find value in, you talk to people that have gone to Harvard, right, and gotten their MBA, Harvard MBA, and ask them what was most valuable to them 10, 15 years later, and it's the network they created while they were at school, right? And so there's network effects. That's why they call it networking. And they can be really valuable as you build it over time. It's a cumulative asset, right? And we try really hard to create an environment that really facilitates that with like-minded people with complementary skill sets, right? So that new businesses can be formed, founders can be found, all those sort of things.
It's all about getting out of the house and getting into a room of people that you can converse with and share and learn from.
Until the virtual reality world takes it all over, right?
Exactly.
All right, thank you everybody for coming out on a cold night.